2006 through 2015 Mini Cooper S with the 1.6 liter turbo engine, thermostat housing replacement. I'm Brian Essick from How to Automotive. I'm going to walk you through the steps of replacing the thermostat. We're going to get started by removing the air snorkel, loosening up the clamps here and here. Before we can pull the boot off and out of our way, we need to remove the brake booster vacuum hose here. So you just squeeze these little tabs like this, and you'll squeeze in, and then you'll pull the hose upwards and off like this. Now you can just kind of tuck that over to the side and out of your way. Now you can flip the air snorkel over. I'm just going to leave everything hooked up to it and flip it over like this and rest it over here. Now we need to disconnect the mass airflow sensor, so you'll just squeeze the little tab and pull off. Now on the left side of the air box here, there's going to be one little screw here, a torque screw. You're going to remove that right there. That screw is a T25. To make quick work of that, I'm going to use the Milwaukee M12 1/4-inch ratchet here. You can get so much more done using tools like this. I highly recommend you guys check them out. So once you get that screw backed out, it's not going to come out of the air cleaner. It's just going to stay in there. That's normal. So now on the right and the left side of the air cleaner, you're going to lift straight up and pull up. And then right here is going to be a snorkel here that we need to get off. And you're going to pull that off the air cleaner. And once you get that pulled off, then you can remove the whole assembly. Now we need to get the rest of the air snorkel out. So if you follow it around underneath the core support here, you can see where it's mounted. You're just going to give it a good pull and it'll pop out. It can be tough though. You may require using a screwdriver to get it out. Once you get it free, you can just work it out by twisting it and pulling until you completely removed it. Now we're going to start by removing the hoses here that's connected to the thermostat housing. There's 5 hoses in total connected to this thermostat housing. To get those off, I use a combination of regular pliers or these special hose clamp pliers like these, or some you can use straight pliers. There's an assortment of tools you could use to get these clamps off. If any of the hoses are tough to get off, you can use a pick tool to help pick the hoses off the thermostat housing. But you want to just be careful not to puncture the hoses if you're reusing them. So once you got this first hose pulled off, you just want to bend it back or flex it out of your way and just tuck it off to the side like this. Now you can start working on the next hose here, which is the little further in. Before I start working on the other hoses, I'm going to go ahead and pop this wiring harness up. So you're going to use a flat blade screwdriver right here, and you can put it in right here. There's a little tab where the plastic is mounted, and you give it a little twist and a pry, and the harness will pop straight up. To create slack in the harness, we need to unplug a few of these connectors here. So you just follow them around. You're going to pop them off their little mounting brackets, and then you're going to unplug the electrical connectors. Having a good pocket screwdriver or a really small screwdriver is very handy when it comes to unplugging all these connectors. So once you get some of them unplugged, you can start lifting up and start pulling, and you can get them free. Now I'm going to unplug the coolant temp sensor here. And then there's a second little sensor here. If you look, these two plugs are exactly the same, so you want to make sure that you don't mix them up. So you want to either mark them or remember how they go. This one has a yellow mark on it already. So once you figure that out, you can go ahead and unplug those two. To unplug them, I'm going to use a little pick tool like this. And at the bottom of the connector is a little plastic tab that we need to flare open. So I'm using the pick tool to do that. And once you get it popped off, you can go ahead and do the opposite one. So you'll just put this inside the bottom of the connector and just give it a little pull, and then you can pop those connectors right off. Once you get those two disconnected, you can just flip those up and out of your way. Right here is a closer look at those little tabs I was talking about on the end that you got to flare open. If you look right here on this connector here, it's easier for me to demonstrate how they come off. So you have it plugged in, you're going to hook that little hook tool on the end of it and pull upwards a little bit, and then pull the connectors off. So now we need to disconnect the 2 vacuum lines here. One going to the brake booster vacuum pump here, and then the other one's going to the turbo down here. So you're going to pop these 2 vacuum hoses off. To help get those hoses disconnected, I'm using a pick tool. Once you get them unplugged, you want to make a mental note of how they're routed and go ahead and pull them out like this, and you're going to tuck these vacuum hoses out of your way. So once you got those tucked out of your way, there's going to be a few little electrical connectors we need to squeeze. One right here. So you'll squeeze both the tabs on the left and the right side of the connector and pull straight down. And then down here at the bottom, there's going to be one more electrical connector you're going to pop off right here. Now that you got all these connectors free, like now you can lift the wiring harness up and push it to the left or right or whatever you need to do to get to the hose clamps now. Now we can go ahead and remove the second hose here. It's the big hose. And I'm going to use my my hose clamp pliers here. So you're going to put that onto the ends of the clamps, give it a squeeze, and pull the hose off. Now that you got the two front hoses pulled off, we can maneuver the wiring harness out of our way, and we're going to remove the two heater hoses here. So you're just going to squeeze these clamps and pull the hoses off. As you get these heater hoses unplugged, you just flex them out of your way and tuck them off to the side like this. Now you can work on the next hose here and get this hose clamp off and remove this hose. These hoses like to stick onto the thermostat housing, so you just be patient with them and work with them. Once you get those two hoses disconnected, there's going to be a clip in the back of the thermostat housing here that we need to get to. There's a pipe running under the intake, so you can see that little clip sticking up. I'm using a hook tool, and I'm going to hook inside the clip right here, and I'll give it a twist and pull the clip up and out. This is tight quarters and can be a little tough to do, but if you're patient, you'll get this little clip popped up. Once you get it fully released, it's going to look like this. Now you can flex the wiring harness to the left right here, and then there's going to be a 10mm bolt right there you can remove. Once again, to make quick work of that, I'm going to use the M12 ratchet here with a little extension and a 10mm socket. So once you got the top bolt here removed, just below that, about an inch or so down, is going to be a second bolt right here. It's kind of hard to see or get it on camera here, but the bolt is right here. You'll feel for it. And there's plenty of room to get your ratchets and stuff down here. It's not too confined. So there is a fifth hose here that's attached. And if you can get it underneath, you can pop it off there, or you can take it off a little further up on the pipe. I choose to take it off on the upper portion of the pipe and leave it connected to the thermostat housing, and then I'll take it off the thermostat housing later. And then so after you get that done, there's another 10mm bolt right here underneath the main neck. And if you look here, I got my extension and socket on it. You can see it. Now that you got the bolts unbolted, you can lift the wiring harness up, and now we need to pop the thermostat out of that pipe in the back of the intake manifold. And to do that, you're just going to wiggle and pry the thermostat housing towards you and out of that pipe here in the back right here. So you have to wiggle it and pry backwards at the same time, and it will pop free. So once you wiggle the thermostat housing free from the pipe and pull it back, it's going to look like this. So that fifth hose I was talking about here, I went ahead and pulled that hose clamp off here, and then I went and used a pry bar here and kind of just pushed the hose off. So that hose is connected further underneath the thermostat housing, but it's easier to get to this pipe right here to unplug it here or disconnect it here. So I pushed that off. Then you can go ahead and just work the thermostat out. Here is what that hose looks like on the bottom here. As you can see, it's quite difficult to get to that lower ones. So now you can clean up the mating surface where the thermostat housing was mounted. You can use razor blades or anything, or wipe it off if it needs to be, and clean that up. I also used a little bit of fresh water here and just kind of poured it over the transmission and washed off all the coolant that came out, and it took a little compressed air and blew it out. I also have a bucket underneath the car. I forgot to mention that in the beginning of the video. So I have a bucket underneath there catching all this runoff and stuff. So I'm kind of drying it up and get it nice and clean. So there's a pipe under the intake manifold, and it looks like this. It goes from the thermostat housing all the way under the intake and mounts onto the water pump. This pipe can be difficult to change. It may require you to actually take the intake manifold off. My customer chose not to change this pipe, so it's an option. If this pipe is in bad shape, you want to change it. If it's in decent shape, you can let it go. So here is the part numbers for the thermostat housing. It's a genuine part. I'll be sure to link up the parts and tools in the description of the video. So we need to transfer this hose over to the new thermostat housing here. So I'll squeeze the clamp, pull it back, and then transfer it straight over to the new thermostat housing, put the clamp back on it. Then after that, what I'm going to do is take a little bit of lubricant and put it on the hose here. And I'm also going to put it on the O-ring around here. This is a special lubricant, but what works really well is Vaseline. Some lubricants can make rubber parts swell. So Vaseline is a lubricant that will work really well without expanding the rubber or making the seals swell. So now we're going to feed the thermostat housing in. We're going to stab the hose onto that pipe. So we'll install it down in here, and we'll put the metal pipe and hose connection together first. Make sure you have the hose clamp in place and slide that on. Once you got the hose slid onto the metal pipe, I left the hose clamp loose for right now. We'll tighten that up in a minute, or install that in a minute. So now what we're going to do is we're going to push this portion of the thermostat into that plastic pipe that's underneath the intake. So you're going to line it up and give it a good push until you feel the thermostat bottom out into that pipe. And the thermostat will be mounted flush against the cylinder head also once you get it in position right. Now that the thermostat is fully seated, now you can take the 3 mounting bolts, and we're going to install those. What I like to do is take the bolts and I put them into the socket with a piece of paper like this, and that way I can hold the bolt upside down or wiggle it and it won't fall off, so it helps me guide them in there. So I'll guide them into the top one first, and then I'll start the bolt. Then I'll start the bolt on the second one, and then the third one. I'll leave them all loose until all 3 of them have started. After they're all started, I'll tighten them down until they're tight. Then I'll take this plastic clip here and reinstall it onto the thermostat housing here. So it's kind of difficult to reach around, but you'll reach around and you'll line it up with a little groove on the pipe. And once you get it lined up, you just push it until it fully seats back into the groove. Once you get it fully seated, it's going to look like this. Now that the pipe is resecured, the 3 bolts are resecured, you can go ahead and put the hose clamp on the lower pipe here. After you get that resecured, then you can start flipping the 2 larger hoses in position, install those, and install the 2 clamps. Now that the 2 larger hoses are installed, you can go over in the back and we can flip the one that we tucked out of the way here. It has the fork on it. That one goes onto the bottom port, so you go ahead and install that onto the bottom port of the thermostat housing and start the clamp. Then we can flip the second heater hose into position, put it on the port, and start the hose clamp on that one. Now we're ready to start plugging in the harness here. So you'll plug in the 2 temp sensors here on the thermostat here. One of them we marked before, so you go ahead and line up the one that didn't have a mark. It will go on the sensor here in the back, and the one that had the mark will go right here on the front. So you go ahead and line up those two temp sensors and plug them both back in. Once those are both plugged back in, now we can take the main wiring harness here and we can reposition it back onto the little tabs that were mounted on the thermostat housing. So you will slightly lift the wiring harness upwards and then position it back onto the little mounting tabs on the thermostat housing itself. Now we can start plugging in the rest of the sensors. So you'll plug in the one on the top here, remount the little harness holder here, plug in the fuel pressure sensor here, and the temp sensor on the bottom of the thermostat housing. So you plug all those back in. After all the electrical connectors are plugged in, we can take the vacuum lines and reroute those back into position. So you're going to reroute them exactly the same way you took them out. So this one routes behind this pipe here that goes for the cooler portion of the turbo. So you'll route the longer hose underneath it through here, and then you'll go ahead and plug in the 2 hoses. Once those are plugged back in, now you can take the air snorkel here and route it underneath the wiring harness and go ahead and plug that in towards the front of the core support here. So it routes underneath the reservoir bottle there and plugs back into the little snorkel inlet right there. Now that that's installed, we can take the rest of the air box here and flip it back over and reinstall the air snorkel and reinstall that back over to the on top of the manifold here with these little rubber tabs that made up with the ports on the bottom of the air cleaner. So you'll stab the air snorkel portion first, and then once that's stabbed, then you'll take the air cleaner itself and push it down into position. Once the air cleaner is resecured, you can go ahead and make sure all the piping is plugged in. Plug in the mass airflow sensor and resecure the screw in the back here and tighten that down. Once that's secured, you can take the vacuum booster hose here and go ahead and reinstall that. There's also a little clip here that was mounted onto the bottom of the air snorkel. Make sure that's clipped back in. Now you're ready to take the rest of the snorkel and mount it onto the air cleaner and then onto the other end of the turbo and start the 2 clamps. And then you can take this portion of the vacuum hose booster line it up with the port, push it on and give it a little pull. Now we're going to fill up the coolant reservoir with 50-50 mix BMW approved coolant. Now we need to bleed the air out of the cooling system. If you look on the old thermostat here, there's a bleeder screw here just right next to the temp sensor. So we're going to take a long screwdriver or a socket and put it onto that little port down there. And then you can crack it free or turn it loose counterclockwise a few threads. You don't want to take it all the way out. You just want to back it out a few threads. And that allows the air to leak out or seep out of the cooling system. And you'll see this coolant level start to drop as the air starts bleeding out. Once you see coolant actually leaking out of the thermostat housing bleeder screw, then you can tighten it back up. Then you can top the coolant level back off to the proper level. Now you can start the vehicle up and let it run. We're going to run it until that thermostat opens up, and then you're going to double check your coolant level. You're also going to run it long enough to hear or see the cooling fans run. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes for this to happen. You're going to constantly double check the coolant level. Make sure it's not over full. This is what you call an expansion tank. So there's a fill line that you want to fill it up to and not any more than that. If it's over full, you want to suck a little bit out. You also want to make sure that the AC or defroster is not turned on. Then what I like to do is put the blower motor speed on low and put the heater on high and run it until the cooling fans run and operate. Once those operate, the last steps are going to be is to make sure that there's no codes stored in the computer. If there are, clear those out. Then you're going to make sure that the coolant is at the proper level. If it's over full, suck a little bit out. If it's under full, you can add a little bit. And that'll complete the job of replacing the thermostat housing on a Mini Cooper. I will link up all the parts and tools in the description of the video. That way, if you need to pick any of those up, you can find those there. I'm Brian Essick from How To Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching my videos. Encourage you to subscribe. Invite you to head over to the howtoautomotive.com website for more valuable videos like this. And I'd like to remind you that when it comes to working on cars, experience is everything. Thank you again for watching.